What's up, everybody? It's Jared with Capture the Magic. And when it comes to Epic Universe, there was a lot of hype and anticipation about this brand new park, which opened earlier this year in May. And since then, the lingering question, or I guess you could say questions out there, have simply been, when will these wait times go down at Epic Universe? Because that is an issue with this theme park. And based off of that issue, when will annual passes be offered to Epic Universe? And this is something I've talked about before, about very likely you were not going to see that in 2025, but will you see that in 2026, or will it more than likely be maybe sometime in 2027 before we see annual passes offered at Epic Universe? We have an article from Disney Tourist Blog here that really kind of dives into this question that I think did a really good job in this article. So we're going to go through here and talk about when might we see annual passes at Epic Universe. And I think if you're looking for them sooner rather than later, you're probably going to be rather disappointed. But we're going to go through this, talk about it, and give some thoughts on it. It says, when will Universal Orlando include Epic Universe in annual passes is a common reader question. Many theme park fans are itching to purchase annual passes, especially Floridians, myself included, or those who have avoided buying regular one-day tickets to visit the new park. It says, we'll share the company's official position and speculate as to when APs might be sold. Let's start by covering what has and has not been officially announced. Universal Orlando has confirmed that annual passes for Epic Universe will be available at some point. Back when tickets first went on sale, they shared that, in quote, more details regarding annual passes that include Epic Universe will be announced at a later date. Of course, we don't have the exact answer to that question. Currently, if you are an annual pass holder for Universal Studios, you can purchase discounted one-day tickets to Epic Universe, and you are able to still use your annual pass holder discounts at Epic Universe, and that was extended into 2026. So you can use those, but there's no dedicated annual pass offering to Epic Universe. So when Universal Orlando will offer Epic Universe annual passes is basically a math problem, or rather a few math problems. Die-hard theme park fans and locals hate to hear this, but annual pass holders are less desirable. I mean, I think if you've been around theme parks for long, you do know this. They like annual pass holders, but they don't spend as much money as people that come on, week-long vacations or once-in-a-lifetime vacations. They just don't spend as much as those groups of people that come in. Some of you might remember when Disney dearly departed CFO mentioned on a quarterly earnings call that Disneyland's results were worse than expected due to unfavorable attendance mix. This garnered a ton of backlash amongst fans, with some even brandishing the title as a badge of dishonor. There was such an uproar that Disney even issued a statement to the Wall Street Journal that unfavorable mix is financial parlance meant for investors and not a consumer term, which you could say that, but more than likely, they do want less annual pass holders. I mean, they just don't spend as much money. I mean, that is what they meant, but they, tried to kind of cover that up a little bit because they did get some backlash for that. This always struck me as odd, even as an unfavorable guest, that so many of my fellow fans viewed objective per-guest spending data as some kind of a personal affront, and it is incredibly well established that guest spending is higher via regular tickets than it is annual passes. Deep down, we all know this, completely agree. If that weren't the case, why would you even be reading this or asking the question? Instead, we'll be quietly going on about our business, relishing in just how much money we've saved by buying one-day Epic Universe tickets as opposed to APs. Obviously, that's not the case. Spending $159 plus per day on Epic Universe admission is considerably more costly than a lump sum annual pass purchase for most fans, especially those who visit Epic Universe at least once per month. Of course, admission is not the only consideration when it comes to selling annual passes. If it were, no theme park anywhere would offer annual passes. And yet, with the exception of Tokyo Disney Resort, every other Universal and Disney theme park does offer annual passes. So we're going to break down the rest of the equation now that we have established the unfavorable part of annual passes and why they talk about an unfavorable mix. Disney talked about it. Universal does have that as well. Universal just hasn't publicly come in and said that and kind of had the backlash that Disney had a few years ago. For Universal Orlando, one upside of delaying the rollout of annual passes for Epic Universe was capturing more one-day ticket sales. As noted above, that's more revenue on a per-visit basis than the APs would generate, and even with an add-on with an aggressive pricing structure. There was a period of time in which the early days of Epic Universe when this was savvy as it pushed locals to spend more money on single-day tickets. Based on crowd trends, this demand has been long since exhausted. Locals and theme park fans are largely sitting on the sidelines waiting for annual passes or other discounted admission to become available, which makes complete sense. I am one of them as well. I would love to go to Epic Universe more, but I'm not wanting to spend $150, $160 or however much it would be every time I go. And I think there's a lot of locals, especially that are in that same camp, which does open the park up, which makes a lot of sense that Universal is going to basically favor people that are spending money on, either one-day tickets, they go on a vacation package, or bigger vacation packages. So if guests that are spending a whole week at Universal are getting the precedent over locals and those that are just looking to go to, get an annual pass, which makes sense from a financial standpoint completely. As exciting as Epic Universe is, there are only so many times even the most diehard fan will pay full freight to visit. Some might go seasonally as a special treat, but weekly or even monthly visits are uncommon. For Universal Orlando, the downside of delaying the rollout of annual pass sales would be reduced revenue if or when the parks have surplus capacity. If they are no longer capturing this single-day ticket revenue from locals, annual passes provide a nice boost in a new revenue stream that does not come at the expense of regular admission. On top of revenue from the sales of annual passes themselves, having this local population would also help fill Celestial Park's surplus of restaurants. And if there is excess capacity, APs would help put a floor under wait times that incentivizes sales of Express Pass to tourists, which that probably should not be understated. So obviously theme parks will favor people coming for week-long vacations and that group of people over annual pass holders, but having a steady influx of annual pass holders in your parks, which Universal does have a higher percentage of annual pass holders part of their general attendance per day than, say, Disney does, but it does set a floor, which you don't have super low wait times a lot of times, which does help them sell more of the Express Pass because people look at the wait times. And so you always kind of have a built-in floor there, which can push those up. So even though they don't make as much money off annual pass holders, that is that is a steady stream of money coming in. They do spend money still, but they can also help boost up other type of incentive offers that a theme park will have. However, the massive caveat there is the if or when the parks have surplus capacity. It was precisely this asterisk that prevented Walt Disney World from selling APs for a while during the phased reopening and pent-up demand period back when the parks were still not operating at full capacity. With per-visit spending being significantly higher amongst tourists, there's a tremendous opportunity cost in allocating park capacity to annual pass holders if the bandwidth does not exist, which it does not currently at Epic Universe. Allocating capacity and balancing tourists versus locals or frequent visitors is really the whole ballgame. If capacity is a scarce resource, it's always going to be tourists who are prioritized over locals. Capacity is no longer scarce at Walt Disney World for 350 plus days per year in 3 of the 4 parks, hence the relaxation of reservations and no restrictions on AP sales. Thus far, it has been a totally different story for Epic Universe. For the first few months of the park's existence, Epic Universe ticket data could be obtained by scraping the Universal Orlando backend website. Unfortunately, Universal finally wised up and closed that loophole that allowed that data to be acquired, so we no longer can see how many tickets are available and how many tickets have been sold. Prior to the data lockdown, we knew Universal Orlando was originally limiting attendance at 12,000 to 15,000 guests from the start of previews through the end of June, depending on the day. That then expanded to roughly 22,000 guests per day in July, and that's where the upper limit stood through the remainder of 2025 per the data. But even people I talked to at Universal, I don't actually think that cap was at 22,000. I still, at least the last that I had heard, even into July or maybe even part of August, it was still around 15,000 guests per day, but it could be higher, as Universal has said they're looking to increase the efficiency and capacity of these rides. So I don't know really where it stands now, but I do know even in the summer, I don't believe it was actually as high as 22,000 guests per day, because toward the end of when you can see that ticketing data, I don't really think it was that reliable. So I don't really know how much I would put credence in that, but talking to people, some people inside Universal, it was still somewhere in the 15,000 guests per day range, at least sometime in the summer, the last time I had heard. There were some changes to those allocations that expanded the number of tickets available, but the bottom line was that Universal Orlando was still selling around 15,000 to 20,000 tickets per day. This is despite Epic Universe having a theoretical capacity of 35,000 to 45,000 guests. Given this, it would seem like Epic Universe did have excess bandwidth, right? Well, not really at all. And if you've been following this, you know that they don't. Even though the regular tickets were available for purchase most days, Universal Orlando was purposely introducing a lot of friction to discourage guests from purchasing them. And this has been talked about before, but trying to go to Epic, you had to get a package that included 1 day at Epic. Instead of having a park reservation system, I don't think they ever wanted to go down that route. So they kind of went with this friction ticket sales method to try and I guess you could just say limit the overall demand of the park in some way instead of going a reservation method, which from everything I've talked to Universal, they do not want to go a park reservation method. So I think that they went this way as a way to try and limit the amount of people coming in without having like a hard reservation system or some other type of system they would have to try and manage. The reason for that is simple. Epic Universe crowds have been awful. Epic Universe set a record for its busiest day ever on July 16th, when average wait times were 85 minutes and the crowd level was a 10 out of 10. That was followed by back-to-back 80-minute days, August 6th through the 7th, and there have been several other days at above 70 minutes, and with daily lows in the mid to upper 40s. Late June was the start of a stretch when weekly averages were 64 to 68 minutes for 6 consecutive weeks, with all but 1 week in the 64 to 66 minute range. Since then, crowds did not cool down in August and September, with some weeks in the 51 to 59 minute range. That is progress, and that does point to they may be getting better on the ride efficiency, but not quite where they still want it to be. It was also the off-season, though. Wait times at Epic Universe are worse than any other park at Universal Orlando or Walt Disney World, despite the likelihood of daily lower attendance than any of them. And as we've stated countless times before, the high wait times at Epic Universe are due to ride reliability and operational efficiency or lack thereof, and not overwhelming demand. I mean, there is demand for Epic. Obviously, you wouldn't have these wait time issues if there wasn't demand, but it's not as if like they're obviously limiting the amount of people coming in here. In a brand new theme park, we talked about numerous times on this channel, is going to have issues to work through. So the first 6 months to a year of a brand new park, you can expect issues to be there, and one which we're seeing are these new rides, these very high-tech rides, having to work out issues of going down a lot, or there was the issue with Battle at the Ministry where they couldn't get all the ride vehicles running at the same time. I'm not really sure where that stands now. I have heard it has gotten much better. They're actually introducing new elements and features into the ride as time has gone on, but that is the main issue you have, is the high wait times here due to the unreliability of these rides. And also in the summertime, when it rains, most of the rides in the park go down, which you did recently see Universal. There is one new permit out there. I've also been told there is more coming. There's going to be not only just one new addition to Epic Universe, but very likely another one either at the same time or very shortly after this other one. So they are working on creating more attractions for people to do to try and space out these crowds, which is going to be something they're going to have to do, but at the same time working on the ride operations and the efficiency of these rides as they continue to work those out. So I think that's what their overall plan is to add more capacity into the park, but in the short term, try and get these rides more reliable, move more people through them to be able to get more people into this park. Because not only just to be able to allow annual pass holders, but they want more people in this park so they can obviously make more money. And currently they are kind of hamstringed on how many people they can come into this park due to the wait times here. Consequently, even if Epic Universe is only admitting 20,000 guests per day in a park that could theoretically accommodate 40,000 or more, the reason they wouldn't sell APs is because the latter number is theoretical. Epic Universe is still new and finding its footing as it works to address downtime, ride reliability, throughput, and general efficiency. I'd be inclined to argue that at this point, its actual operational capacity is not even 25,000 guests, and certainly not over 40,000 guests. The number who can be comfortably accommodated without guest satisfaction dropping to unacceptable levels is far, far lower. Based on statements from Universal leadership and their actions in throttling attendance by introducing friction, they recognize this, and that is why annual passes are not available. That is completely true. And I've actually talked to people at Universal that have said as much. Like, they know it's an issue, and they're kind of trying to battle this with still figuring this park out, still working on the ride reliability, the throughput, all these things, while also still planning on things that they're going to add to this park. So they're battling short-term issues with a long-term vision. And obviously in the middle of all this means there's not going to be annual passes during all this going on until there's a breakthrough. If they feel that they can make a breakthrough here, but as of right now, we haven't really seen it too much in terms of the overall average wait times, which would have to go down significantly before you even remotely start talking about adding annual pass holders into Epic Universe. As for when Universal Orlando will start selling annual passes to Epic Universe, there are a lot of other things that need to happen first. The first is that operational efficiency needs to improve. That will happen gradually over time and has happened to some degree, I would say. It always does with a new park. Team members will become more adept at dispatching ride vehicles at faster intervals, maintenance teams will reduce ride breakdowns, and uptime will increase. It's impossible to predict when this will occur, as it's a gradual process. The other thing that will happen first is Universal will pull all other levers for increasing attendance at Epic Universe. They'll reduce friction and make it easier for tourists to visit the park. The first step in this direction came with the release of the 2026 Epic Universe one-day, multi-day, and park hopper and discount tickets. So in case you missed that, Universal Orlando tickets for this year have included Epic Universe as a separate entitlement instead of allowing park hopping or choosing how many days to visit the park as part of a multi-day, one park per day ticket. The result is the multi-day tickets for this year have all been offered only a single day at Epic Universe, regardless of the duration. So even if you bought a 14-day ticket package, that only included one day at Epic Universe. So no matter even the international tickets or the 3 to 4 day ticket packages, all of them had one day at Epic. And again, having that friction ticket sales method is really what they're doing here. This has made Epic Universe visits even higher stakes and more stressful, which is compounded by crowds, downtime, and delays, weather closures, etc. Some locals noticed that discounted annual pass holder tickets for Epic Universe are available throughout 2026 and concluded that meant APs won't be available at all next year. That's one sign, but we hardly view it as conclusive. If Universal felt the need to sell annual passes, they'd change policies on the fly and deal with refunds or applying the value of tickets to APs. It's not like they're selling many of those one-day tickets at this point. Cleanup of that isn't going to dictate their business plan. What we don't know is what type of impact park hopping and less restrictive regular ticket policies will have on daily attendance. Tourist volume might spike as those with multi-day tickets might go from visiting Epic Universe on an average of 1 day to an average of 1.5 days. Alternatively, it might barely budge. Another possibility is that attendance normalizes throughout the day, or that the stakes are lowered for visiting Epic Universe and guest behavior evolves. Guests feel less pressure to do headliners, so they pace their days differently, and that is what nobody knows. I mean, even Universal themselves at this point don't know that, which is something like before you see annual passes, there's a lot of things that have to happen. And once they introduce the park hopping here, there's going to have to be a period of time where they see how do the crowds flow, what does it affect before they move on to the next step, which eventually leads to annual passes, but it's going to be a process. Even independent of this, Epic Universe attendance might organically increase. Word of mouth might boost numbers, and tourists who were previously sitting on the sidelines waiting for the initial rush to wear off or the hiccups to be resolved might start booking trips. Or word of mouth might be negative, and the initial rush might wear off, and there might be just a lull. I don't really think there'll be a lull. I think there's still a lot of pent-up demand, and I think if you do start seeing a breakthrough on these operational issues, wait times going down, I do think a lot more people would feel more comfortable going to this park. And I think once you hit that close to a 1 year mark, I can see a lot more people being like, okay, I'm willing to spend more money or money to go on a trip here. And I've told people from the get-go, if you're looking to drop a decent amount of money going to Universal to go visit Epic Universe, personally, I would wait until some of these issues are ironed out, because if you're going to spend the money to go here, you want to be able to get the most for your money. So I do think if they start seeing these issues, lessen, that you could start seeing an influx of more people coming in because they feel more comfortable, which at that point, annual passes could be even further down the line if more people are coming to this park or they start lifting that higher capacity before annual passes are even looked at. So again, a lot of things would go into this before annual passes are actually introduced. On top of that, we don't know what other levers Universal Orlando might pull to entice demand and fill the park with excess capacity. There are a lot of potential stops between one-day tickets only and unrestricted annual passes. Universal might try discounted Florida resident tickets, package deals, free days with new AP purchases or renewals, and a variety of other promos. Simultaneously, they will need to find ways to prevent the other parks from hollowing out as a result of less restrictive Epic Universe tickets, which is likely what, you're seeing the new coaster going in to replace Rip Ride Rocket. And I do know there are other things coming to the existing or Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure parks, probably for this very reason. Those other parks definitely need some new things to fill it out, especially if you go to Epic Universe. It's a different experience in the other existing parks. So they're going to be adding not only things to Epic Universe to the existing parks for this very reason here, as Epic Universe continues to work through its issues, and they don't want the other parks to basically be cannibalized by the attendance to Epic Universe. Selling AP strikes me as the measure of last resort. I completely agree there. Once they've exhausted all other options for increasing revenue and attendance, Universal has plenty of other better levers they can pull first. But on the other hand, Universal has not historically been as patient and methodical as they have with Epic Universe, and at some point they could revert to their norm. They have been patient. They have been holding back ticket sales partially due to they want the customer satisfaction to be there, as they could really let the floodgates open, make a lot of short-term money. But if people are really dissatisfied, the negative word of mouth gets out there. That's what they're trying to balance. So they have been patient in many ways in the opening of Epic. I think they do look at it as a long-term investment, but they did spend $7 billion on this park, and they do want to make their money back. So how patient will they continue to be is really the question out there. I get the indication from everybody I've talked to that I think they do have a long view in play here. I don't believe they will rush annual passes just to try and, make more money in the short term at the sacrifice of like the long-term reputation. But things can change. Economics can change. They may feel a push from investors or the higher ups that they need to get more money out of this park, and that could definitely play a factor. As for an answer to the main question, my best guess is the annual passes to Epic Universe won't be sold before August 2026. This is the earliest date we'd predict that any APs will be sold. I would say for sure at the 1 year mark in May, but I mean, August 2026 is a decent timeline there that goes into you have a little bit of a fall off in the fall when kids go back to school. I tend to agree. I think May to August would be the earliest you would see them. But if I was a betting man, which I'm not saying bet on anything, but I would not bet on them coming in 2026 at all unless there is some sort of major breakthrough, which is possible. But as it stands now, I see no reason as to just why they would introduce APs into the mix unless there's a massive breakthrough in wait times. A more realistic baseline scenario is January 2027. Although we just wrote that the 2027 ticketing policies aren't conclusive, there is something attractive about a clean calendar year break, just as there was with the regular ticketing and park hopping. The difference is that regular tickets are part of the annual product, whereas annual passes are more revolving in nature. Even so, January 2027 makes sense because it gets Epic Universe past its second holiday season and the single busiest week of the year. It's a valid point. Depending on how well regular ticket sales and vacation packages are going, or conversely, how badly operations continue, Universal Orlando might not need to sell annual passes at the start of 2027. If Epic Universe is doing really well with just tourists, they might elect to put off pulling the AP lever until August 2027. So it's color me skeptical on that, even if it would be a good idea from a crowding or guest satisfaction perspective. I doubt Universal leadership will have the patience to wait that long. They want/need to recoup the investment in the third gate, and they're historically more aggressive than they've been to date with Epic Universe. The introduction of annual passes could happen earlier in some extremely limited capacities, such as a new $1,500 top-tier AP like Disney World, or with a restrictive reservation system, but that just doesn't seem like Universal style. I get the feeling that Universal wants to stay as far away from a reservation system as they can. Before Epic opened, there were the rumors that there would be essentially a waiting list to get into the different portals, and I do think they had that set up as a default that they needed it, but I have got the indication from everybody I've talked to Universal, they want a very simplistic vacation experience. One of the main complaints you hear about a Disney World vacation is how complicated and just how you have to be on your phone all the time. There's all these extra steps. Whereas Universal, ever since especially 2020 with COVID, has seemed like a much simpler vacation destination. I think they want to maintain that. So I don't think they would go with the reservation system. Now, the top tier AP option, like a select few number of APs they would sell for Epic Universe, is definitely something they could do. I'm not going to be surprised if they do that. Like the Premier Pass holders get an Epic Universe option on top of it. It's going to be expensive, but I could see them opening up to that group of people or that option or that tier of annual pass before having just general ones like they offer at the existing parks. That is a scenario that I could definitely see. While I do think they will only offer Epic Universe add-ons to their top tiers of annual passes at first, I'm skeptical that they will be insanely priced or go to Disney-level links to control access. I do think anyone expecting Epic Universe access at anything close to the current price points or extras like included Express Pass is in for a rude awakening. That will be disappointing if they don't have Express Pass after 4 as part of the top tier option. I think eventually Epic gets there like all the other parks do, but that I could definitely see. I think they're going to, whatever they do, they're going to do in just small increments before things. I mean, eventually things will probably be very similar to Epic Universe as they are at Islands of Adventure and Universal Studios like 5 years down the line. But between then and now, you're just going to be small levers pulled, including annual pass options before they go kind of full throttle, I would say. Of course, Epic Universe could get APs earlier. If attendance is much softer than expected in early 2026, maybe Universal hastily rolls APs out then. If parent company Comcast is disappointed with the ROI on its new $7 billion theme park, perhaps the bean counters push for a quick fix. And it's also possible that something like an economic slowdown or recession accelerates Universal's plan. My gut is that's not what happens. That more realistically, we're looking at sometime between the off-season next year, after school goes back into session, around mid-August 2026 and mid-January 2027. That seems like a reasonable timeline for the rollout of Epic Universe APs, but if a time traveler told me they weren't being sold as of January 2027, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised. I would be surprised if they are sold before next August, though. I agree for the most part. I mean, the points he brings up about when and what levers they'll need to pull before annual passes become offered is completely accurate. So they're going to go through a process of park hopping, multi-day ticket options, seeing how crowds react to that, seeing how the park operations do. And once they introduce those, if the wait times stay high or they even climb higher, you're not going to see APs at all in 2026. I think the big question you have in the short term, it really is, are they going to be able to make enough breakthrough in these ride operations where they don't go down as much, they can move more people through them to be able to bring these wait times down? The wait times are just the overall thing here that you're going to have to look at. If they start making progress on those wait times and get more people into this park, that is when APs become something that's going to be offered, because they definitely want that. Even though they don't spend as much money as people coming on a week-long vacation, they still spend money. I mean, APs, local APs will come to the park frequently, get a snack, get some food. They don't buy as much one time, but the lifetime or a year, let's say in 1 year of an annual pass holder, they will spend a significant amount of money. And also that's just an easy money that Universal can make by offering that as an AP option. Now, when my actual prediction here, and it's going to contend on these operations here. So it's like looking into a glass ball that you don't have all the answers for. But as it stands now, we're about 6 months of this park being open. We haven't seen a lot of, we've seen some progress on wait times, but not a ton. And we'll see what it looks like during the Christmas season, because it's going to be very busy, as the Christmas time is probably the most popular time of year for theme parks nowadays. How the wait times go during the busy time, and then how do they go in the first part of 2026, I think is going to give us a decent indication of how things are kind of going into almost 1 year of operations for Epic Universe. If we hit May and we're still seeing the wait times where they're at, there's not a lot of breakthrough there. I don't think you see APs in 2026. They could do a fresh start, in 2027, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if you hit May 2027 and beyond, like 2 years before they offer it. I get the indication from talking to people at Universal, they're not in any rush to try and introduce it, even though they want to. I do feel like they are being pretty patient and trying to let this park work through its issues and having a long-term view here. But at some point, especially as Comcast linear assets continue to depreciate, they do need to make, or wanting to make, more money from the theme park. So if they hit a point where those linear assets are really hampering them, you could see them kind of make a move here to try and offer some sort of AP, even if it's a top tier version, to get more people into this park to try and get more money out of it. But I think as long as you see the past 2 quarters with their earnings report, they saw an almost 20% increase in revenue since Epic opened. I think if you continue to see increases in revenue on the earnings reports with Epic Universe on the books, I don't think they're in a huge rush necessarily to really push APs. Now, if they see a down quarter or something they don't like, that could be a different scenario. So personally speaking, I'm not going to be surprised. I might even predict we don't see annual passes till sometime in 2027. I think if they're in 2026, there has to be a major breakthrough, or they add some entertainment options, which I have heard they are looking at adding some more entertainment options in Epic Universe. So they're working on short-term and long-term solutions to this problem. There are these rides really built to move a lot of people through them. Obviously, Monsters Unchained is one. Battle of the Ministry, when it is running at full capacity, can move a lot of people through it. We just don't know where that ride currently is. But some of these rides just don't move that many people through them. And so I think as a current status of the park, there just needs to be more attractions, ideally some indoor attractions, but obviously that move a lot of people through them at one time. And I think that is something that will definitely help out this park. But even if they start construction today on the things that they're going to be building in Epic Universe, they're likely not going to be done for 2 years or so. I don't necessarily like that, of course, but being realistic, I do think that's kind of where it stands. I thought this was a good article. Again, Disney Tourist blog, Tom Bricker. He does cover Disney, of course, but he is pretty fair, I think, when it comes to Universal and even talking about Epic Universe. And I think it's pretty level-headed. And I agree with just about everything he says here about, what triggers would be there before annual passes would be offered. I don't have a crystal ball nor a time machine, so I'm not able to check that out. But if I do get one, or if there is breakthroughs in these wait times and ride operations, we will talk about it here and let you know about it. But for now, that is going to be it, though, for this video. So if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, when do you think Epic Universe will have annual passes offered? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.